Hi everybody, I'm Jen. It's nice to see all of you. Thank you so much for coming. Mary is correct. I do know a lot of folks in the room. It's kind of this weird convergence of all these different parts of my life, but I'm really glad to see so many of you here. We are super excited about the panel today. I'm going to talk about tech-savvy in-house counsel and all the different things that that means. As Mary mentioned, I've had a chance to work in-house for the last 10 years, and in doing that, I saw tech come up in so many different ways. I started my career as a labor and employment lawyer, and I remember kind of toiling away on a settlement for like $41,000, and then starting in-house in a shared services role, and having someone who's actually in the room come to me, one of my internal clients, and say, hey, we've got this license compliance issue, it looks like it's gonna be $600,000, and I was like, what? And so it's just so many different ways where tech can sneak up on you. Even if you're not a tech company, you're gonna be using tech for your infrastructure. You're going to be using tech to kind of mobilize your operations. That was certainly true for us at a supply chain logistics company. And then you're also going to start to use tech in your legal department. And that's really what we're going to focus on here today with our panel. What are the different ways where GCs and other senior leaders in the legal department can really mobilize their teams through using technology? Not just from a what's the tech and what does it do perspective, but also from a behavioral perspective. Not all lawyers are super adoptive of technology, and so we're going to talk about that too. How do you convince lawyers, other folks on your team, other folks in your business, to use technology and to figure out how to do it in the most productive way? So really excited to have our panelists, and I'm going to introduce them now, so I'll just kind of go this way. We have Amber O'Donnell, who is the General Counsel and VP for Tripwire. Amber is going to bring us the perspective of a tech company GC, talk about how that impacts her organization. We have Mike Goodman, who's Senior Counsel for Nike. Mike leads all of Nike's global technology sourcing portfolio of work, and so he's going to speak to that portfolio. We have Ann Tucker, who is the Associate Director of Ethics and Compliance for Intel. Ann's going to talk about how tech can mobilize your ethics and compliance function. And then we have John Grant. And John has started a new company called Start Here HQ. John is a thought leader, and he focuses on process development, and he's going to talk about how lawyers can think about building technology into their business from a process perspective. So welcome, everybody. I'm going to turn over now to Jay Hull, who is going to lead us through our panel discussion. Thanks again.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Jen. I'm Jay Hull, and I've started a company of my own called Hey Jay, What's Going On? Just me. So I thought to get us started, why don't we start with a nice polite question and just ask, why aren't we farther along? Why haven't we made better progress?
I'll start. I think one of the factors is that we are taught in law school a particular problem-solving methodology that we refer to as the case law method. And it puts a huge value on terms like precedent and stare decisis. And we learn it as if it is the only problem-solving methodology that mankind has invented. And I think that it teaches us to be naturally conservative. It teaches us to do things the way they've always been done. Sorry, thank you. I can pull too. And I think that broadening our minds both as practicing lawyers, but also going back into the legal education and understanding that there are other problem-solving methodologies out there, right? The scientific method or design thinking or lean and agile and lean startup. And being able to understand that having a broader tool set will give us more ways of cracking at things will start to help get us further along.
Somebody else?
Yeah, I'll go next. So I think a lot of it is inherent, and I think we'd all agree in terms of how lawyers are trained, especially when we grow up and begin our careers in law firms and then maybe go in-house and we take those habits and practices with us, which aren't always focused on efficiency, let's say. And I think that while there is, in many ways, especially in compliance, almost a utopian vision of how technology can help support our programs and help us get our work done, especially with limited resources, there's more fundamentally a sort of process challenge. I don't think technology can solve some of the legal department or legal functional problems if you don't have your process improvement in place. And I think that that's really where we need to think about we need to begin sort of the discussion and the definition of the issue before we look at buying a new, a new tool that's out there from a vendor or building one in-house.
My take on this is that the reason we aren't farther along is that a lot of the problems that we're wrestling with, whether it's in the compliance space or the transactional area that I work in, it requires integration of solutions that involve people, process design, technology, and there are a variety of institutional barriers that basically make it so that you can't buy solutions out in the marketplace. So a lot of the incumbent providers in the law business are institutionally not set up to exploit those kind of opportunities the way in our economy, other, down in Silicon Valley, for example, there's a whole way of thinking that's not prevalent in the legal industry. So some of those institutional barriers, the ethics rules that prevent investment by non-attorneys or make it harder to do that, I think that's a big part of it, because my experience has been that trying to build all this DIY yourself as a in-house attorney is super challenging. If you could be presented with solutions that you can see, touch, feel, that would be very powerful in unlocking the potential in our industry.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway.
Okay, good.
I think we're not farther along because tech is scary to a lot of people and it's expensive.
What company do you work for?
I work for Tripwire,
Oh, yeah.
cybersecurity company. So, and so not in our case, but I've seen that in other environments. And so there's as people have alluded to, I think lawyers tend to be a bit risk adverse. And so the idea of spending money, and maybe what seems like a lot of money to an in-house lawyer, on a solution that may or may not solve your problem and might be labor intensive to set up or complicated and all of those things, there's, I think those are a couple of big barriers I've seen.
Okay, great.
Can I piggyback on something
Please
Mike
do.
said, just to give a little plug? So I was recently co-chair of the Futures Task Force of the Oregon Bar, and we recognized as a task force that there are some things around the fact that we are a self-regulated monopoly that has perhaps led to some monopolistic behaviors that are sometimes counter to innovation. So I would encourage all of you, if you haven't paid any attention to the report of the Futures Task Force, we're recommending that we start to maybe break down some of the regulatory barriers. And I think it's something that all Oregon lawyers, but particularly in-house lawyers, those who are clients as often as they are providers, should really be paying attention to.
Okay, great. I want to mention too, I should have right at the outset, we'd like this to be more interactive than it just was. We're not going to go down the line and then come back down the line this direction. So we've encouraged the panelists to interact with each other. They don't have to worry about the stuff I had prepared. And if you have something that you want to interact with, just let us know and we'll engage you in the conversation. Okay, so maybe let's look at the vendor community for a minute. What are some things that you might like to say to the vendor community that you think they might not fully appreciate about the challenges that you face? What could they do that would make your life easier, or make it easier for your colleagues to adopt technology tools?
It's extremely challenging to get companies to invest in the legal function. Like, typically that's not, they will do it as necessary, but when you're trying to get resources, the more you can make a convincing case about the benefits of an investment, and the more that can be quantitative, that's really important. So again, kind of just putting tools out there without really helping your potential customer build a business case to implement, I think that's super challenging. So.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I think recognizing, knowing who you're talking to, companies can be very different and of many different sizes, and a big company like Intel, and I think probably like Nike too, has a lot of legacy IT systems, legacy tools, lots of, we pride ourselves on being process oriented, but there's a lot of bad things that go along with that. There's a lot of bad process out there, along with the good process. And so, I see some, in the compliance world, especially like the anti-corruption due diligence vendor world, there's so many new entrants, right? I mean, I get calls. I actually don't answer my phone anymore, to be honest. I get calls from vendors all the time, and I've been working in this field for over 10 years, and yeah, it's just there's more and more new entrants. So there's so much opportunity there, and I think people really see that compliance teams, especially, really want to use technology and really want to be data driven because, well, otherwise, what are you doing it for? You have to be able to show regulators, show your management, right, that what you're doing, is effective, et cetera. It goes hand in hand with the whole purpose of a compliance function. But the problem is I see a lot of solutions out there, and if you look at how they're described, this will replace your entire third-party onboarding system, or this will solve all these problems across legal compliance, procurement, finance, accounts payable. I'm like, well, I said, that right there, I'm no longer interested. Because there's no way at Intel I'm going to get our procurement organization to throw out what it's been doing for years and adopt this whole new solution. I mean, that's that's like a multi-year, senior management, executive level priority shift really that would be necessary. So really recognizing that for who you're talking to, if you're talking to someone like me, a compliance lawyer who's looking for a tool or technology that can aid one of my compliance programs, having tool offerings and solutions that really can be configured or adjusted based on the limitations I face in terms of our internal systems.
What could a vendor do that would really catch your eye? You're not going to answer your phone, so they're not going to call you.
Well,
it almost sounds like you're saying you're more drawn to maybe a more realistic or a smaller sized offering. Is that part of it?
I think so, or one that it's not we're gonna solve the world for you sort of solution, right? And a lot of our pain points are really minor things like assigning training, getting questionnaires out, like little problems that, believe me, most of my colleagues, don't care about at all, but I mean, take up tons of hours of myself or compliance program managers, paralegals that I work with. And being able to solve a little problem like that can actually go a long way. And then, if you're able to prove yourself in that sense, absolutely, I think there'd be interest in expanding a relationship beyond that. I will say, I don't pick up my phone a lot, like I said. I follow the blogs, the journals, or the websites. I mean, I know generally, who's in the vendor community, but the best reference ever is a lot of informal benchmarking I do with peers at other companies. And when I hear that they've had a good experience, that makes me want to talk to a company more than anything else.
That's the same thing I was going to say. I think in-house lawyers do use each other a lot as reference points and resources, and as different as our businesses might be, I continue to be surprised at how we're trying to solve the same issues, and a lot of it is around efficiency and process and all of those things. So when I learn that someone else has solved something, I want to know how they did it, and then I want to do the same. So those customer references or other lawyer references are huge.
Okay. How about, since we started with the vendors, let's move to outside counsel. What could they do that would really make life easier for you in terms of their own use of technology or shared use of technology with you, or perhaps telling you about a cool technology tool that they think you might be interested in? How could they make it better?
So maybe I'll start. I've got a couple of things. Being in the industry that I'm in, I want communications and sharing of documents to be secure. So it's really important to me that the law firms that I'm using, that we've got good encryption, and there's a lot of different solutions out there. This is not the solution space my company's in, but I want to make sure that just as a way of protecting our reputation, I don't engage with my outside counsel in a way that has an insecure communication, and then that somehow gets out. So I really want security in how they're using technology for shared resources. And my biggest thing, and this goes back to a comment that Mike made earlier, is I need predictability. We have to fight for every dollar we get as a cost center in an organization. And so I need to know, I need to be able to sit down and predict the future with everything, whether it's litigation or M&A or you name the issue. So with outside vendors, the more predictability I can get in fees, the happier me and my finance team are.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something, and I've been on both sides of the in-house and outside counsel equation, and the number one thing that I don't think outside counsel understand is that even discounted rates are still not predictable,
Yeah.
right? Flat fees, portfolio deals, other ways of measuring so that you can deliver predictability to your client is going to win out over the difference between an 11 or a 14 or a 17% discount off of your rack rate every time.
For sure.
Agree.
Yep.
I heard a story about one client who said, here's what happened. You big fancy law firms came in and told us you're the best at this, you're world class at this, you know how to do it better than anybody else, you should hire us. And the client ultimately said, okay, what's it gonna cost? And the big fancy firm said, we have no idea. And you know, that disjunction between we're the best and you should hire us and we can't give you any guidance about the pricing, I think is a real challenge. The firms that are represented here are in a different category because they're already worrying about thinking about these issues or they wouldn't be here. But I think the general lack of sensitivity of outside counsel to the pressures that in-house counsel have with respect to costs and budgets is pretty shocking. I won't ask any of you to speak about this, but I know of companies, we all do, where the individual bonuses of in-house counsel are tied to the adherence to budget for a particular project. So, you know, to think that I as an outside counsel might do something that would keep you from getting a budget, that's hard and something that would really need to be addressed.
Yeah, just to build on some of the points that have already been made, totally agree with the predictability issue, and I think, you know, I mentioned institutional barriers, so it's interesting if in my area, which is transactional work, providers that approach me do, you know, hundreds, thousands of different types of transactions every year, and like one big key unlock is to, as an institution, be able to think statistically about how much it costs for you to deliver that a particular type of work based on a pattern that you do all the time. And it's interesting how much resistance there is to that. So instead of saying, okay, we know because we've actually analyzed it that to do a particular type of transaction with these attributes will statistically, on average, cost X amount of money for us to deliver that, and we'll make, in order to make the profit margin that we want, we should price it at X. That kind of thinking is just very hard for them as an institution because the whole way they compensate attorneys, they can't lose ever on a single deal, right? They can't think statistically as an institution. They can't invest because they distribute all the profits of the partnership out every December or whatever. And so they just fundamentally don't get this challenge that we have, that we, you know, if I can turn the cost of delivering into something that's data, that I can go to my boss and I can say, look, we're trending 20% growth this year, so give me 20% more money. I can't make that case if I can't get predictable pricing from my vendor. So that's I agree, that's a huge unlock if you want to have people want to go to lunch with you, right?
And predictability, I think, is more important than having the least expensive legal services. So that it's very different. Those are two different issues. But the predictability is huge.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, let's just pause for a minute and see if anybody wants to engage on the topics we've been talking about so far. Yes,
I'm
Sheila.
interested, particularly from Amber, because you mentioned that you are worried about security or concerned about security. Do you have, people might want to know what are your favorite solutions that you use?
And Amber, would you just repeat the question for the record?
So the question was, given my concern about security, do I have favorite solutions? And I actually don't. I'm pretty open. What we do is when I start engaging with a law firm, we do basically a vendor security analysis. And then if we're using technology and sharing really sensitive information, I've got a security engineer who researches all this, and I just look for the green light from him.
Right.
So I don't have specific recommendations that I can give you.
Just want to make sure that ours are okay.
Yeah, I know a good security engineer if you need anyone to check it out.
I mean, maybe
Yes,
this is.
Nick?
Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry.
In in terms of predictivity, how about utilizing cloud?
How about
Artificial intelligence.
Okay, how about using cloud and artificial intelligence to enhance predictability of legal services?
So you can have a big database of the cloud, which will help you to gather all the information you need to making that prediction. Oh, the growth is going to be 25% or 10%. So you have a ballpark of your number, and then you will gather your information with the right knowledge to make this prediction.
So is anyone here from Littler Mendelsohn? Good, then they can't prove me wrong. So I'm going to give you some of my understanding. Littler's engaged in a really interesting set of experiments over several years. And they do mostly employment law, and they started 5 or some years ago by buying a piece of software that was meant to basically streamline some of their operations around charges and single plaintiff cases. And again, I won't get this exactly right. This is my outsider's perspective, but they made some improvements. They were able to get their processes built, and sort of a combination of process and tech. And then they said, well, gosh, we're getting more efficient at this, and billing hourly is actually a problem. We're starting to go more quickly with these matters, and so let's introduce a flat rate. So they introduced a flat rate, and that was all well and good, except that they had associates working on those matters who were compensated hourly. And so what they're billing is a flat rate, and the way to make money under flat rate is obviously to keep your investment to a minimum, but the associates have to meet their targets. And so they're treating it like a fee cap, not like a flat rate. And so they're not making any money on that, so they say, well, gosh, let's change our staffing mix. So they bring on staff attorneys, right? And now they're able to compensate staff attorneys maybe not on the hours they work, but on the throughput, the number of matters they handle per month, right? And all this time they're generating data. And so most recently, at the beginning of this year, they unlocked their sort of data dashboard. And so now when you log on, again, this is my understanding, I won't get this right, but when you file a new charge to say, hey, Littler, we want you to take care of this BOLI claim or this EEOC charge, you log it into their system, they immediately run a data check where they say, oh, hey, great, we know that based on the past work we've done for you, your average time to settle is going to be 13 months, your average settlement amount is going to be $48,000, and oh, by the way, this is how you benchmark against other of our clients in your industry, and this is how we can break it down based on the role of the employee who's bringing the charge. So it's happening, and it's out there, and I think Littler's really leading the way. But they're kind of out there largely alone. I mean, there are others that are getting there, but Littler's done a really good job. So, to your point, that is a great use of big data. One of the problems that I see is that people think of big data as this magic wand silver bullet, as with many technologies. And they don't understand that Littler's been building this thing for 5, 6, 7 years, right? It's been a very gradual, iterative process where they solve one set of problems that immediately introduces the next most interesting problem. And then they solve that, and then that introduces the next most interesting problem. But they're making these incremental improvements, and they compound like interest. And so now, all of a sudden, as far as the labor and employment market is concerned, I think Littler is light years ahead of the competition. And I used to work for one of the competition.
Nick?
What solutions are you all seeing from your outside counsel to give you that predictability in terms of legal spend? Or what, at least, maybe if not a solution, what efforts are being made to meet those?
What solutions or efforts are being taken to provide you with greater predictability in your outside counsel spend?
I'll just start by, and my comments will be short, not a lot. I feel like it's the same as when, a decade ago I was a young associate, and I feel like in my world, internal investigations is where most of our group's outside counsel spend goes, and there it kind of operates like it always has. Definitely on more sort of discrete or well-defined guidance or counseling projects or risk assessments, we'll talk about budget more. We talked about it in terms of investigation, but you never know where they're going to lead and what's going to happen exactly. So it's kind of done as it always has been.
So from my journey, I like the journey piece because that's definitely true. So I talked to people for years, harangued legal service providers of various types, trying to get them to understand my issues, and I finally found a partner that understood and was willing to work with me. And after a lot of steps along the way, I basically have again, I'm a deal lawyer, so and my goal is to kind of play more top right when I look at my portfolio of work, and that difficult middle and lower zone kind of as much as I can reduce my touch on that. So I have kind of basically contract as a service with a partner who gives me unit pricing, has agreed to meet service levels. I capture lots of great data out of the process, and so I think in my area I've kind of gotten there. It was a journey with a lot of steps along the way, and a lot of incremental improvements, and but the you know, I couldn't buy it initially out in the marketplace. I had to work with someone who got it and kind of develop that. So so right now it's working really well for us. We're trying to proliferate it in our company, which again I think Intel's kind of the same, like getting folks to kind of gravitate toward a new way of doing things is just super challenging. There's people with commitments to existing technologies, to existing processes, existing ways of doing things. So that's kind of a challenge in any big company. But
we really need it to be the GC or some very senior leader within legal to make it a priority, because otherwise you're not going to break down the functional silos. You're not going to get, people to care more about their little universe and wanting to get something done, even if it's, bigger picture wise, it's not best value for the company, for the shareholders, and it's making their lives miserable anyway. They just want to get that done that day or that week, and you have to have someone who looks across the organization and actually can drive serious change to make it a priority.
Is that your guys' experience? Like our CEO is obsessed with innovation. Our CAO that we ultimately report into is very obsessed with innovation. Everybody wants to be able to tell an innovation story, and I would say, like, there was some talk about like how are in-house people incented these days. At our company, to build your brand as a member of the legal department, having an innovation story is super important. And so again, having a partner who can help you build that story and tell it, that's really powerful. Like just knocking out deals that are well done, it's important, but it's actually not the...
It's table stakes. Yeah,
it's table stakes.
Actually
Exactly.
it's similar, and when I started at Tripwire, I was their first in-house lawyer, the CEO. I think he would have been happy to never have a lawyer on his staff. Great man. He really, really is. But part of my gaining credibility within the organization was showing him how we were doing things different from a traditional legal mindset where it's about hours and dollars and all of that. And so for sure, that in my environment, when I can go in and say, here, we introduced this thing, and look at, but you're getting better service, better turnaround, I'm saving money, that's a compelling story.
And in order to tell that story, you've got to have the data to back it up, right? So you must have some
Absolutely, that's right, yes, yeah.
approach either independently or maybe
Yeah.
even better with outside counsel to really provide you with reliable data.
That's right, and I think of when we were starting out as this little fledgling legal department, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, we decided to institute DocuSign. And that felt a little scary because back then not everybody used it, and it still felt a little cutting edge, and there was questions about, can it be enforced everywhere? Could I use it for corporate documents, not just contracts, and all those things. We got over those hurdles, we did it, and I had one of our contracts managers track her time to see what kind of return on our investment we were getting. And after the first 90 days, she said it cut down her like scanning and printing and stamping and all of that of documents by overall it gave her about 25% more time in her day, which is really compelling, right? So when I could say that later, I wish DocuSign would have come during the sales process and said, you are going to save. There's going to be so many hours back in your day where you can do value add work instead of just these more administrative functions. So yeah, having a partner that can articulate the savings is powerful.
Although I think the flip side to that, and you're talking about some of the resistance within legal practitioners to adopting technology, is that their jobs might be at risk. Maybe you had 2 admins and now you only need 1. One got fired because you now have this great tool. I mean, I know, I'm not in the group, I know in our litigation group we built over several years this, I think, pretty industry-leading e-discovery process and tool. And in the end it was great, and now we only need like 7 instead of 14 paralegals to spend all our time with it. So it's great overall for the company and for the leadership, but yeah, the people who are forcing this change on are looking right at a potential, termination at some point, right?
Yeah.
Or being let go.
Yeah.
I don't know, my view is, and maybe this is a difference in the size of the company, there is so much work to do, and when you talk up and to the right, there's so much work that I want us to be focused on, that moving into that quadrant, and we're tiny compared to the legal departments that you guys have.
That's right, but even for contract lawyers or others
Yeah.
that see, their field that they've maybe grown up in at risk, you just have to look, there still needs to be, they have to be able to pivot, and you have to help them pivot. Like,
That's
the
exactly
idea,
right.
It's not a black and white situation.
Yep.
Can I try to consolidate? So one of the things that I've heard before this most recent thing, right, is that I think all 3 of these general counsel, in-house counsel, are talking about metrics that most law firms are not paying attention to, right? Law firms track hours, they track realization rates, they track days, days till they get paid, right? These are all the things that are really making it, that are obsessing sort of the partners, the managing partners at many, many law firms. But that's not what clients are talking about, right? Clients are talking about ways to measure improvements in their businesses and improvements in their outcomes. And I think changing the conversation, and I think for more outside counsel to ask their clients or potential clients, what's an important number to you? Just to give one example, at the last firm where I was doing process improvement work, we took on a big portfolio deal for employment work for a shipping and transportation company. And working with our outside counsel, we came up with a metric where we said, well, gosh, what do you spend on employment law matters on a per employee basis per year? And over the course of a portfolio deal of several years, we were able to reduce that number by almost 30%. Now, part of that was because they were growing and they were hiring more people, but their legal spend wasn't increasing. And so by coming to an arrangement, an agreement to say, yeah, this is actually a really good KPI, key performance indicator. Let's look at this and let's track it over time. And that really sort of led a lot of credence to that relationship, right? That's a really strong relationship for that firm and that company.
We definitely are asked that. Like within the last year, I think our general counsel asked every single group within legal and our policy team to present in like 3 bullets or 1 slide, essentially, 3 areas that they have increased efficiency and saved costs, like in the last year, right? So when we got down to looking at, and oh my gosh, pulling the data together to prepare this was hard for our group, but even harder for other groups. For litigators, for the deal lawyers, always to try to show through data how they've increased productivity and efficiency. That's really hard, and it was kind of eye-opening for us. But we were down looking at what is for some of our major compliance audits, where we are maybe doing a behavioral audit and reviewing emails and working with some outside firms or service providers on that. We have driven down the cost per page. That it's coming down to that level of detail. It seems insane somewhat, but it's that type of exercise that you actually are forced to go through sometimes. Yeah,
the tension with the sort of effort-based pricing model that most law firms have You mentioned the Littler experience. I've had a terrible time, I've succeeded finally, but I've had a terrible time in identifying providers that kind of get the basic point that some more predictable pricing model might actually be more profitable for them if they take on the innovation challenge. So it shouldn't just be about how is the in-house team innovating and saving money. That doesn't necessarily imply that the provider loses. If you can increase productivity at the provider, I believe that like what we've been doing has actually helped me save a substantial amount of money on a per transaction basis and help my provider become more profitable. One of the big unlocks, for example, was that my provider, I think, historically, or law firms that used to work for us historically, assumed that what we wanted was like the best possible contract on every term in the document. And that wasn't
one wants that.
That wasn't what we wanted.
We want to close the deal.
We wanted, we wanted to win on 3 or 4 things. And so just by changing the pricing model, then they became suddenly very eager to talk to me about how to reduce touch on deals. And in the process, my clients have never really cared how tight the deal is legally. So they were happy because everything happened faster. I'm happy because I saved money, and they're happy because they increased their margin and they got a ton more business, so they increased their overall profitability, right? So that type of thinking, it really is all about productivity. And I think that the institutional barriers I keep talking about is that I can't find people that think like that.
And that's, I think that's what it comes down to. It's that alignment with outside counsel, right? At how we track, what we value, what's important to us, and there continues to be a big disconnect. I think people have been talking for a long time about, the billable hour is dead. It's not dead. I arm wrestle every time I engage counsel on, something new that I want some level of predictability on. But similar to what Mike was saying earlier, though, I found the specific providers that will partner with me, and there is an element of trust. And actually, I want them to get paid. I want it to be a profitable relationship. I want them to answer my calls and value me as a client, and money is a factor there. And so, so similar experiences.
I think, I've seen in several instances where moving to flat rate is actually more profitable. I almost guarantee you, and I haven't seen their financials, but I am certain that Littler is more profitable doing their charges on a flat rate than they were using associates before. But probably not the first time, right? And that's the key. And one of the things that happens when you move into that flat rate or a fixed fee type environment is you start instituting quality control. You start instituting process improvement, right? For most lawyers, our version of quality control is, well, I guess I'll read it again, right? and see what clicks in my head this time, as opposed to.
And what does that cost me?
Well, yeah, exactly, and it does.
Yeah.
And so, but at Littler and other firms that are moving in that direction, I think Davis is one, right? Having a more defined process and saying these are the steps and these are the quality checks, and over time you develop not only more efficiency, but a much higher quality product, right? It's less error prone, it's less variable, and that works better for clients as well.
I think there's a lot of opportunity, especially in the compliance space, for firms to provide services to clients that really aren't quote unquote legal work, right? I mean, putting investigations aside, so much of what you do in compliance doesn't need to be done by a lawyer necessarily, and the headcount constraints we're always facing, the fact that we really end up with very little administrative resources, but so much of just third-party due diligence is so administrative, and it's a lot of it. It's painfully, and it's a lot of drudge work and the like, and it's repeat issues, and just volume is high, and sort of legal process outsourcing solutions where you want them to sort of understand the legal framework that this program sits in, but you don't need lawyers, doing day-to-day execution. I think there's a real opportunity to offer more there for companies, because we definitely are, facing headcount restraints and the like, and I can't get enough sort of administrative and compliance manager, paralegal support for the processes I need to make sure execute on a daily basis.
If we could just stick with that for a minute, what's the effect on you if you hear about a firm that is really strong on project management disciplines, and they have their own internal legal project managers and those kinds of things? Does that matter to you? Do you ask about that when you're in an RFP context or otherwise evaluating a firm that you might like to consider?
One thing that, in my area of contracting, contracts touch so much of our business. There's so many processes that, compliance processes we have to follow. I'm going to answer your question, but the long and short of it is trying to come up with service offerings that allow you to integrate on a day-to-day basis with what your customer does on a day-to-day basis and make their life easier on a day-to-day basis. And then you become the go-to easy button on what could be very lucrative projects if you can bring the right resources to get them done. So.
Getting in the door can be hard, and getting just access to the needed systems so that you can support and interact with people internally can be tough, but once you cross that threshold, if you prove yourself, I mean, it can be a very long-term relationship for sure. And the hard thing is just, even with paralegals and program managers in my space is that everyone wants, career development opportunities, and no one wants to do third-party screening for the rest of their life. And I'm like, I just need to get this done. I'll talk to you about career development later. So really, there's so much opportunity to just outsource so much of the day-to-day execution of these programs, and I think it's got to be an outside of the department solution.
That's good. I know one thing that comes up often for law firms in that context is there's always a question, well, what about training? And my response to that has been, after you've looked at 1,000 landlord lien waivers, you're not going to learn much more by the next 1,000 or the next 1,000 after that. So I think the training needs can be accommodated. Let's do a agile, user-centered design type thing right now and see if any of the folks out there have a question or would like to redirect the discussion. Michael.
Okay. So one question, sort of getting back to your question about RFPs, Jay, and understanding that people solve day-to-day problems are more likely to get the big RFP opportunities. But Jay's question was, I'm rearranging it. What are the three most important factors that help you determine who should win an RFP process, or which firm or outside consultant to use?
Okay, three most important. I'm stalling now so you can all think.
No, I love that question.
Three most important factors for these panelists in deciding which outside counsel firm they want to work with.
Or specifically for an RFP.
Okay.
So one thing that I would say is that in any company that you're approaching, recognize that there's a diversity of people, a diversity of kind of orientations that the people will have that you're pitching to. So in the area of kind of doing legal work in a better way, some people will be highly motivated by cost. Some people will be highly motivated and impressed by innovation and how you will deliver. Some people will be really interested in just like, who am I going to work with? What's that person like? Do I trust them? Do I connect with them? And so I would acknowledge that it's very hard. I would try to ask. Like, it's interesting, a lot of people will get like an RFP, I think, and they'll assume things about what the customer, I think most people who are actually seeking partners are more than happy to give you advice on that. Like, what do you think the primary orientation of the team will be? Are they highly motivated by cost? Are they trying to solve a people problem so we need to emphasize our people team? Like, I would ask lots of questions and listen well, because I think that is really hard. In a recent one, like, I'm very geeky and interested in the delivery model, and I had colleagues who were on the panel with me listening to the RFP they just wanted to trust the person that they were going to be working with. So they were more about not you know, how they'll deliver, but just like, who am I gonna talk to every day? So it's a really good, it's a hard thing to deal with when you're pitching someone, I think.
Amber?
I was writing down my things.
Yeah.
So when I've done RFPs, one of the it's so interesting to get things back. So the last one that I did was for some litigation. We sent it out to 5 law firms, and the responses range from 7 pages to 47 pages, and which is pretty interesting, right? And the one that was 47 pages wasn't necessarily the best. A lot of it was not tailored to what we were doing, and so my favorite of those was the firm that really felt like they dug in and they understood our issue. So the first thing is I want them to take it seriously, and I wanted the response to be about whatever our problem is. The second goes back in my mind to that criteria, like specific criteria. I wanted in that litigation people with just extensive software patent litigation in a certain space. And if anyone would have said, what are you looking for? I would have said, I need to see, you know, the bios of all your people that do this and all the cases you've tried and all of that. But not a lot of people don't ask. I give them here's what I want from you, and they just serve me up a response. And then the third thing is, for us, going back to my theme, predictability was costs. And so some firms came back and said, I asked about alternative fee arrangements, and some came back and said, here's the range of what we think this would cost, and one of them, the range was in millions, and I'm like, I don't know what to do with that. Like, that's a big range. So is it on the high end or the low end? What do I take to my people? Some provided caps and collars and all those different things, and that was helpful. But the guys that ultimately won were the ones who they knew us. They did other patent work for us. They knew our people. We trusted them. I went in with an open mind. I wasn't expecting to choose the incumbent, but they also, probably because they knew us, were more comfortable asking questions, so they tailored their RFP. It was like, here's everything I want, you know, so, and I can check all those boxes.
Great. Anne?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely echo the emphasis on being concise. That saying more with less definitely goes a long way. And on top of that, I think if you're doing a presentation, or if you're, say, a vendor and you're doing a demo, making sure that it goes smoothly, like the first time, because there's nothing like, especially if you have somebody, like a decision maker who doesn't have a lot of time, who may be calling in your manager or my manager, right? If it doesn't go smoothly right away, I mean, it's gone. And then, and definitely just a PowerPoint presentation, just do your research on the company, and, you know, try to have examples of how you've supported similar companies on similar projects, how you understand their unique risks. If it's that off-the-shelf sort of, you know, presentation, that's people are gonna start tuning out, you know, especially if they're on the phone. And then third, I just want to bring this up, it's a little bit separate topic, but it's certainly something that my company, and I know a lot of others, are across the board with outside counsel focusing more on is diversity, not just in overall numbers, but on a project-by-project basis.
Great. John,
Okay,
you wanna
so
jump in?
I don't have experience with it as much, but just a quick plug. There's a great document it's published by the ACC, Association of Corporate Counsel, called Unless You Ask, a guide to in-house counsel for getting more from your outside firms. And if you're in-house counsel and you haven't read it, I recommend it. If you're outside counsel and you haven't read it, I really recommend it. I was involved on the law firm side in an RFP that followed the playbook pretty much to a T. And at one point, the managing partner that was involved in the pitch remarked, "It's almost like these questions are specifically designed to take my pants down." And he was right. They exposed a lot of things, and the answers to those questions and the ability to answer. So look at that document. I think there's some really good, you know, obviously it's too long, and I've told Casey Flaherty, who wrote it, that it's too long, and he agrees. But there's some really good information in there.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Okay. Yes, Sheila.
So, back to the question of predictability, one of the challenges that outside counsel has law firms generally are not necessarily really good at collecting and maintaining good data. Getting better. I know it's something that we work on when I have a fixed fee system for the stuff I do, and I figured it out based on 10 years of memory. Like, that's not the best way to analyze your data. And so the question is how do you guys get data around what things should cost or what you want them to cost and predictability that, are you aware of any resources? Do you collect data of your own inside your own organization and feed that back to outside counsel and say for the last 20 years it's cost X or 5 years or whatever, and can you match this based on these parameters? Are you collecting any of that data? Frankly, giving the law firms a little bit of extra help. And then second to that is, is there a way to aggregate that data? A lot of times it's considered proprietary, and so every company has their own data, and they don't necessarily want to share it, in a big pot. But obviously, that could help if you're giving that data to your law firm and having them analyze it against your competitors and their other clients. How do you
Okay.
manage the data piece?
Okay, so the area is, how do in-house counsel aggregate data? Do they do that themselves? Do they extract data from their firms? How do they collect the data that will help them evaluate what a matter should cost? Thoughts?
So we gather it ourselves.
Do you consider it proprietary so you don't tend to share it, or how do you?
I'm happy to share how we do it. Like not necessarily the numbers for a given provider. We wouldn't share that obviously, but yeah, we categorize all of our transaction types. We capture that in a contract management system that we have. We capture common data elements between that system and our e-billing system. And we have a separate matter for every transaction, which is painful, but it really pays off because then we can marry the two, and so we can see cost by type of transaction, and importantly by handling attorney. So like one of the big unlocks in that data was that for a given type of transaction, there are definite patterns in the efficiency of the attorneys that do the work. So a big unlock was, hey, provider, if you do nothing else, if you just give all the work for this type of transaction to this attorney or this group of attorneys, I can save 20% and you can make twice the margin, right? Like we could show them that because they didn't really ever think that they never had even thought, it wasn't part of their business model. They didn't bear the risk of those types of getting those analytics wrong, so they never did it. So we did it for them, and then I think that was,
Did you analyze the data yourself, or did you have people do it? Because I think a lot of lawyers wouldn't know what to do with the data.
Did you analyze the data yourself, or did you have somebody analyze it for you?
We have an ops team. That's another important thing in a lot of big companies. They're building ops teams within the legal function. So they just use some analytics software to kind of ingest those two data streams and present the information in a very visually understandable way. It helped me also communicate with leaders in our department, and so they really got it. So it unlocked the move to transaction pricing. That right there, I'm like, hey, if you think statistically and we do these things the right way together, you will make more money, I will save money. And so actually we've done a couple of check and adjusts. What happened is we put in the fixed price per deal. The response from the provider was incredibly great. They stopped overworking deals. And so we were able to take another round of savings, and I think still very healthy, profitable business for the provider. So,
yeah, I've heard Mike mention that before. I just think it's an awesome story. That the client is saying to the law firm, if you do this and this, we will save money and you will have better margins.
Right, and then it locked up other opportunities. The people who were less efficient, it's like, let's work with them. make them more like
Right.
the people who are more efficient.
Right,
Let's
figure
train
out-
them on, oh, we don't want you to like work every provision in this
Yeah.
contract that doesn't really matter. Just get it done and focus on these core things. And then we saw that response, and so I think people are better lawyers for it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, let's start looking toward the glide path here. Amber, talk a little bit, you've mentioned this, but talk a little bit about special challenges that you see for tech-savvy in-house counsel in a tech company. Is it easier, harder?
I've always worked in tech, so it's hard to say. I think my suspicion is that it's easier because I can't hire people that are afraid of technology because they're going to be working with engineers and working in our industry. So there's already, if someone wants to come work for a company like mine, they already have to have some interest and aptitude for technology. And then we've got this tremendous, there's so much more to do than we have hours in the day, so that the pressure of just being efficient, how each of us can be as efficient as possible. And when we become convinced that there is a tool that will help us get more done better, faster, smarter, and then we can focus on the more important, higher value work that you can't automate or outsource with the same degree of success. People really want that. So that I've been fortunate to work with a team of people, and not everybody I have on my team, about half of them are firefighters they're just getting stuff done, and then the other ones are the planners who do the RFPs for the whatever the technology is that we're considering, and they plan how it's kind of the ops mindset, right? How do we really make sure that we're not solving the same problem over and over and over again? So I think it's probably easier in my case. We also have that thing of innovation and credibility, and if we just came in with yellow pads and briefcases and looked like lawyers, that would be career inhibiting for us. And so being able to come in and say, we embrace technology, we are using it to deliver better services, to do more for the organization, to help reduce costs, they will keep us around for a little while.
Great. And I know you think a lot about automation of compliance-related functions and what tools can be helpful in that context. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit. Just is it getting better, or what do you see on the automation front with respect to various kinds of compliance requirements?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, in a group like mine, ethics and legal compliance, we use a lot of technology and tools. I'll give you a few examples from, most companies have now, whistleblower hotlines, right? That may be customized, but they're hosted by a vendor. Or you've got third-party due diligence or systems of record, and maybe even workflow built into that. Conflict of interest disclosure tools, gifts and entertainment approval tools, investigation tools that help you sort of triage incoming matters, and then make sure that the procedure is followed, and then it has sort of management reports that spit out of it, all of that. I mean, and these are about 24 different vendors that we've worked with to build these, and some of them we've built in-house with our internal IT resources to extent we're able to get those, and that's very rare actually, at least for legal it seems. And sometimes it's an in-house solution that's we've built with a vendor and we host it internally, and maybe it's just in a SharePoint environment, something pretty simple. And then there's SaaS solutions, and there's other sort of configurable, externally sort of more off-the-shelf solutions. So it runs the gamut. And I think you'd ideally like to get to a place where all of your governance and risk and compliance tools are integrated with each other. I have yet to see a vendor that really can offer everything though, and so that's one of the challenges. You're just gonna, even within our relatively small group within legal, we have information silos to some extent. So I think we haven't come far enough as sort of an industry in to make much progress on that. But I think one of the things that I found is one of the ways I approach these issues now is thinking about how I'm going to have to report out, and then defining my issue and my process from that. So what metrics am I going to have to provide to, my management, other senior management, other, internal, external stakeholders? What is that report, that pretty, heat map and bar graphs and all that going to look like? And then think, okay, how do I get there in a way that's not crazily painful, right? And so how do I then, track that data, make sure things don't fall through the cracks, and then, that's really where I think I can then make a decent case that we have for any particular compliance process, something that's that we measure, that we monitor, and that we can demonstrate effectiveness around.
Okay, great. All right, let me ask a final question, and this one I hope you'll each respond to. Just give a final tip, a final suggestion for in-house attorneys or legal ops people about they're considering purchasing or implementing a new technology tool or an innovation within the organization. What's your best suggestion? And let's keep in mind that there may be people here from really small organizations all the way up through very large organizations. So what's your suggestion, John?
Figure out your process first, and then turn to technology to enable that process or empower that process, not the other way around. I think too many people think of tech as a magic wand, silver bullet, and it can be, right? A lot of what I think people buy when they buy technology is the process improvement, and that can work, but if you don't figure out your own sort of ideal set or what you're looking for, and I think beginning with the end in mind in terms of your metrics, your numbers, your goals, and my favorite piece of technology is like material science, right? Sticky notes and whiteboards, and really sort of diving in, not necessarily too deep, you don't have to get in the weeds, but understanding at a high level, like what is your value chain, how do you get to things? Then you can make far more intelligent decisions about the technology that you're either acquiring out of the box and making a intentional decision that I'm going to give up this piece of my process so that I don't have to do custom configuration, or say, okay, no, look, we actually do, this is important to us, we need to have it rebuilt this way, or we need to build our own system. But I think getting the process right early, as much as you can, right? I mean, there's always going to be changes and variations. Will let you use technology to empower you, and you won't become a slave to it.
Okay, start with the process, and don't assume that you can just buy a piece of technology that's going to solve all the problems.
It happens occasionally, but it's really rare.
Okay?
Yeah, I would definitely echo that, and I mean, I've had cases where we bought this big fancy tool, and I have reverted to much more manual but much more efficient ways of doing things just by attaching something to an email. So really understanding how sort of, especially if you have various stakeholders that are involved in a process, understanding how they work and do business, and having them go through a tool to, say, communicate with each other versus just by email or by phone when they normally do email or phone, and your compliance, and you have to sell, you have to sell this to the business. If you need their involvement, you're going to make very little headway if you're making it even more burdensome than it has to be. So keeping that in mind, I think if you're, in terms of just your group in general, and you want to be innovative and you really want to try something new and you feel resistance in your organization, just start small. Start with something small and really annoying. And then try and just show how you can improve that through process improvement and maybe through technology also. And then finally, I think just have an end game in mind. Like think about, great, we did RFP, we selected a new vendor, we're building this new technology solution. We're going to have so much data on there, we think it's going to be great. Okay, but relationships often end and things don't always work out as planned. Know right from the beginning how you're going to get your information out and what your sort of after action plan is there, because that can be a big issue too.
Good. Mike?
I agree with both of those things. Focus on the process and start small. Envision your maturity path, but try to take steps along the way, I think is most effective. And then when it comes to talking about the process, try to focus on what needs to happen in a well-defined process, and try not to get to the who does each thing in the process. Because in a big organization, what happens is you have people who have defined their lives around parts of the process, and often throughout your company, you'll have different groups that are playing, and so what happens is the who can contaminate the how, and that's kind of a very abstract thing to say, but it's the key to, because if you can do that, then what happens is the who will follow the what needs to happen. Like now we've decided this needs to happen in the process. What are the skill sets of the people that would do that? And then sometimes you can actually get people to agree on that stuff, and then the who is like obvious, right? Procurement should do that, or legal should do that, or the business should do that. I think that's a real key unlock. Again, way before you pick some tool.
Okay, great. Amber?
I would say talk to your peers at other companies and find out what's worked for them and what hasn't. And if you're an early adopter and you're being drawn into a vendor's pitch, find out who some customers are and talk to them. We've learned so much by talking to companies that actually use the tool. Not just were they good or not good, but also how to implement it successfully and having some of those customer reference discussions. And at one point actually was given the name of someone who we talked to who was like, we talked to them, we're like, oh, that sounded like that was bad. We don't, let's not do that. And so it's really, a lot of this is, I love early adopters, but we're not, we don't always need to reinvent the wheel, so.
Okay, great. Well, I won't speak for the audience, but I wish I could just sit there for another 4 hours and listen to all your great ideas, because it's really been really great content, in my humble opinion. Thank you very much. Let's thank our panelists.
Okay, well, Nick is going to come up, Nick is going to come up and do a Darwin talk, which is a 5 minutes, it's like a TED talk. So you need to pull up your slides. Alex, maybe.
Yeah.
Tech support.
We'll watch this.
And then we're going to close out the night. Everyone has to wait after Nick. We're going to close out the night with Michael from PWT.
Okay, well, while Alex is doing that, my name is Nick Brestoff. I was educated in engineering at UCLA and Caltech, and then went to law school at USC. I was on the law review there. I practiced for 38 years. And then I retired and moved up to Washington State, and what happened was my head cleared. And I started to think like an engineer again. So here we are at Evolve Law, and what I started to think about was, gee, this is evolutionary, and I don't want to do that. I want to do revolutionary. And so Darwin is what came up as something for me to do, and I thought, okay, this actually makes sense, because the A and the I in Darwin give you AI, and I don't really mean artificial intelligence in this particular instance. I mean, and I'm going to show you a whole new way for augmented intelligence by attorneys. So the process or the pain point that I addressed was the cost of litigation. That's a specific thing, litigation. Nobody likes it, least of all.
This, but I've done work for Nick, and he is amazing what he's doing with introspection. Anyone here who's in-house should definitely talk to him while he's here for one night only. And the other thing I wanted to say is what he's doing is preventive law realized. This is a whole new conception of what it is to be a lawyer. We should all be very excited. And on that same note, Kim Wright, another amazing thought leader in this area, is going to be in Portland next week, doing an event next Friday. If anyone's interested, I have more details on that.
Okay, now it's really over. Thanks, Alex. It's okay. Get out of here. Thanks, Jay. Sorry about that, Michael. 3 events, 3 sites, 3 days. Yeah, this is Tech Savvy in-house counsel is my favorite of all.